is part one of 2 videos that are going to show you how to cut out a picture like this in Photoshop and then lay it in InDesign and make sure that the text wraps around it like this beautifully. So let's start by deleting this picture because that's too easy because I've already done it, and go back to basics and look at Photoshop. So here I've selected an image of Mr. Farage because I'm sure we're going to be cutting out a lot of his pictures in the run up to the election. And I want to make a note about the types of images you should be looking for. I know this isn't always going to be possible, but you should try for your image to have a different background to the front. So this isn't necessarily white or black background, but it's distinctly different from the image that we're trying to cut out. Now I'm going to talk to you through 3 of these tools, which are the selection tools: the marquee, the lasso, and the selection tool or the magic wand. All of these share a couple of properties. Number one, you have these little toolbars up here that let you either select stuff individually, so every time you make a new selection, it deletes the one before. You can select this one that adds on to it, so if you select something else, it adds it on to whatever it is that you had on before. This one subtracts, so if I do that, it takes it away. And this one looks for the place where they intersect, which is a bit odd, but anyway. And at any point, Command D will take you back to the beginning. So let's start with the marquee. This is a really kind of rudimentary selection tool, so you can do anything from squares to circles, and if all you're trying to do, for example, is to clip a bit at the end of this image, then that's probably the way to do it. Command D to go back to the start. And remember that if you click on it, it gives you all of these little options, so you can do a single, like an elliptical marquee, and go and try and select him in little circles or not. Yeah? Let's talk about the second selection tool. It's the lasso. Now the lasso, I want to make sure it's selected into the additive function so that everything that I select adds on to what I had before. This is a really simple tool that lets you literally just draw around what it is that you want to select, yeah? So you could potentially do a really first kind of rude selection of what it is, crude selection of what it is that you want with this lasso, and then perfect it with the other tools. Now the magnetic lasso, which is the third one in this little menu, has a very clever algorithm that tries to detect where edges are. So if I hold it down here, click, and then start moving my cursor, it reads the difference in colors between these little lines and assumes that that's what I want to select. Now here nothing happened because I have the add to selection bit highlighted, and that's already in the selection. So if I change it to the subtracted bit, see how that changed and gave you a little minus sign in your cursor? So let's try that again. I click once and then just start to drag it through the edges, and see how it's doing a pretty good job of detecting the edges. It kind of clipped his ear a little bit there, coming up, and you close circle. See how that worked really well. None of these tools are going to be the perfect answer for any particular scenario, but all of these combined together and with a bit of patience, you should be able to cut out most images in less than 10 minutes. And that's just more of kind of a guideline than anything. It's not a rule, right? So you have these selections, and that's all fantastic, but let's look at the last one. The quick selection tool. And this one right now, for example, is added onto, it's in this additive kind, and it's a really small dot because I've changed the size of it. So let's make the cursor a bit bigger. Let's make it 25 pixels. See how that changed? And what you do is you click, let me try that again, Command Z to undo stuff. You click wherever it is that you want, and it detects, it tries to think what it is that you're trying to cut out based on everything else that you've already selected. If you use that to zoom in, you'll see that it kind of didn't do a perfect job here on the fingers, but it's close enough where that could help us as a guideline. It probably didn't do its best thing here with the ear, which we can unselect. So for example, how would we do that? You'd come to, let's add this to our selection. So I would do it with the lasso tool to add it, and I manually draw around the bit that I want. And there you go, it's added to our selection. Yeah? Now all of these tools, once again, and as I said before, are just going to help you refine, and you're going to have to fight with it a little bit. But once you have a decent selection of what you want, and one of these selection tools selected, so to speak, you have this button here that says Refine Edge now. And this opens up a different dialog box, and this is going to be really helpful to try and actually get the cutout that you need. It lets you, in view mode, change the background so you can see. Sometimes if you're working over the same image, it's hard to see where you've missed bits. But maybe if you do a black background or a white background, it lets you see a bit more where it is that you're not doing this right. For example, here we can clearly see these fingers need a little bit more work. This is pretty much what we want. So is the suit on this side and his hair, pretty much, yeah? So once you've got that, there you go. You can use these little tools to do more things. For example, Smart Radius tries to think for you and to select what it is that you want, but because our selection is already so close to what it should be, it starts to freak out if we do it a lot. This lets you adjust the edge so you can make it a bit smoother, which I think will help with the fingers. Let's look at the fingers now. See how that's looking a tiny bit better? It just makes the selection edge a bit smoother. This feathers it, which gives it this little weird glow that I just absolutely hate. This makes it more contrasty. Look at the edges. Without contrast, and then with, that just makes them look crisper. So maybe that's a little bit more of what exactly it is that we want. Maybe not 40, maybe something about 20. Shift edge moves your cut towards the image and then to the outside. I would say, once again, that's a question, and that's going to have to be a judgment call of what you do. If you did what I just did and click enter at any point in time, don't worry, it has modified your selection, but you can do Command Z to undo or come back to the dialog box and keep working on it. The last tool that I want to mention is this Decontaminate Colors tool. Sometimes, because of the image, some of the colors from the background will spill over to the image, and you can see it here, for example, in his hair or on the edge of his suit. There's a tiny bit of pink left, and this is what's going to get rid of it. So if you do Decontaminate Colors, I don't know if you noticed, but in the hair, that paint practically disappeared, if I may get 100%. Now that you're done and you're satisfied with your image, you can come to Output, New Layer to make it a new layer, and click OK. And see how it's just made a new copy. Now why am I still seeing the background? Because the first original background copy here is still visible. So if I click that to make it unvisible, then I just get my fabulous cutout of Nigel Farage. Here I have a previous cutout that I've done just trying to practice for it, which actually looks worse than the one that I just did. So let's keep the new one, make the rest of them invisible, sorry, not invisible. Let's come to File, Save As. Wait a little bit for it. Let's save the PNG in case we need to come back and modify it later. So Nigel Farage 2, because I already did the first one trying to figure this out. That's great. And now we're going to do File, Save As again to actually export into something that InDesign can work with. So you don't want to make that a Photoshop file. You want to come down to the drop-down menu and make it a PNG. Yeah, PNG gives it transparency, which means that this checkered background isn't going to translate into white. It's going to be nothing, and it's stuff that you can lay stuff over, and then InDesign is going to be able to recognize as something that it can kind of follow around the edges. Yeah, so click Save. It's going to ask you for a bunch of things, and there you go. If you look at the task manager down here, it tells you it's 72% done, and it should be done really soon. Once you have your PNG, let's move over to InDesign.